Get my camera set. I'm not doing a very good job. I've not had this problem before. Well, I'll fiddle around with it. Let's get going. Let's see, call to order the October 27th meeting of the Board of Waterworks Trustees. Michelle, will you go ahead and take the roll?
Ashburner?
Here.
Bolton?
Here.
Lett?
Here.
Hubbard?
Here.
Moines?
Here. So the first items on the agenda are the consent agenda, the minutes of previous meetings and committee meetings, financial statements, list of payments, summary of CEO approved expenditures in excess of $20,000 and the next meeting date. Can I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Ted, is there anything in there that you would like to bring to the attention of the board?
No, Diane, nothing that needs to be pulled out today.
Anyone else want anything pulled out specifically or have any questions on any items? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and vote. Michelle, you want to take a roll call?
Ashburner?
You want to repeat that?
Ashburner?
Yes.
Thank you. Bolton?
Yes.
Gillette?
Yes.
Hubbard?
Yes.
Moines?
Yes.
Thank you.
Item 2 on the decision agenda is the public comment period. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak at this time? And Michelle, you want to refresh with everyone how to access the box and let us know?
Yes, I just posted into the meeting chat here. If you want to raise your hand, there's a participants button at the bottom of the screen. In that participant pane next to your name, you'll click on raise hand. Similar instructions are here in the chat for doing so on your Android or iPhone device. I do not see any hands raised yet.
All right, so we'll go ahead and close the public comment period. Number 3 on the agenda, action items 3A, 2021 employee benefit insurance renewals. Ted, would you let us know what this is about?
Absolutely, Diane. Happy to. Every year we bring our employee benefit renewal to the board for approval. Oftentimes it's fairly straightforward, and most of it is fairly straightforward this time. And I'm going to kind of start at the bottom of the box that Michelle has displayed on screen there with the 3 bottom, well, no, Michelle, the top box, not the fiscal there, the summary. You can see the bottom 3 items there: long-term disability, basic life, and dental. Those 3 plans are staying the same. And in fact, the premiums are staying the same. There's no increase in any of those, which is a positive. The life and long-term disability are benefits that we continue to collaborate with the city of Des Moines on and receive those benefits through their agreement with the various providers. So those 3 are very straightforward. The next one up is our retiree medical insurance. This is basically a Medicare supplement type of plan that we provide for our retirees who are age 65 and over. If we have retirees who are under 65, they are eligible to purchase our employee health insurance, the same plans that employees have, but they purchase them with just a small offset equal to what the retiree supplement is valued at. This year, the retiree supplement plan is going up about 2.9%, which is a very modest increase. So all of those are fairly straightforward and fairly good news. Medical insurance, the top one is probably the one we'll spend the most time here talking about, employee health insurance. This is, as you all know, the year that we are going to make the move from receiving our insurance through partnership with the city of Des Moines to receiving our health insurance through IGHCP Trust. We've talked about that. We, in fact, approved that relationship change at a prior meeting, and that's pretty much done deal. But the one consideration for the board today relates to the cost share for premiums between Des Moines Waterworks and the employee, how much each individual or each of those entities pays. Now that allocation of premium cost between the Des Moines Waterworks and the employee is currently a contractually agreed upon figure, and it's a fixed amount, so that it's a fixed dollar amount that tends to increase a little bit each year. For the past several years, that increase amount has been subject to our last contract, which was negotiated a number of years ago. The current numbers are in the memo. The annual increases are in the memo. We can touch on any of that in detail if there's interest. But you will remember that last year we received a very significant or fairly significant 22% increase from the city of Des Moines on the plan we were on with them, which was one of the reasons that we were investigating the trust. And at that time, the board did authorize something of an additional contribution that was $100 for single and $150 for family to help offset some of that cost increase. That additional contribution was designed to create a cost share of about 90% to 10% Des Moines Waterworks employee on the standard deductible plan. And we did that because that was what we saw as fairly typical for our peers in our region, city, county, state, and we thought that would be a good way to share that cost, share the benefit of good years and share the cost of not so good years. So that's where we stand today, the insurance premiums that we're paying in 2020. As we move into the trust, we would recommend, staff would recommend that we again make an additional contribution from Des Moines Waterworks that would take us again to that about 90-10 cost share. So 90% Waterworks, 10% employee. For a number of reasons. One, we feel that, again, that puts us on a plane with our peers in the area. 90%, 10%. We also feel that it's important for employees to have some skin in the game, if you will, with the standard contributions. It has happened that if we had a very positive year and our premiums didn't go up, our contribution was actually more than the increase, as opposed to last year where our contribution was much smaller than the increase. So this helps level that out to some extent, but it also would position us in a place where I think we want to land at the end of 2021, when our current union contract will end and health insurance will become a prohibited topic of bargaining. I think this 90-10 approach is a good place for us to land. A couple of important fiscal impacts. If we do make that additional contribution, it will increase the cost of our employee health insurance, the Des Moines Waterworks cost for employee health insurance, about $300,000, 2020 to 2021, which is about 9%. The employees out of pocket will also go up about 9%, which is the goal. So it would be a little bit more expensive than we're paying now, which I think isn't unexpected. Another important point is it's it's $200,000 more than is currently in the budget. And if the board does approve this recommendation, then we will need to address that going forward. But that's the recommendation we bring forward. I think the recommendation is to approve recommended employee benefit insurance providers and rates for 2021. I will note that the 90-10 concept being a departure from what is in our current union contract, that's something that the union didn't need to take to their membership for consideration. An actual vote, they have done that, and the membership has approved that concept. So I think that's a positive. But we would ask that the board approve all of the employee benefits package for the year, but most importantly, from a financial perspective, that concept of cost share that I just described.
Can I have a motion and a second, and then we'll take questions?
So moved.
Oh, second.
If I may, Diane, I'm
Sure.
interested to hear if Bill or anybody from the union has a comment on this, and I don't know if that's an appropriate time, but if there was anybody that wanted, an employee that wanted to make a comment, I'd be interested in hearing what they had to say. Maybe not.
I see Bill reaching for his phone, but maybe not.
Well, we'll give him a chance in case he's having a technical difficulty, but you know, I support this. I think that you're moving in the right direction. We are moving, Ted, I appreciate your leadership on this, in the right direction when it comes to how we share these expenses with the employees. I mean, obviously healthcare is a national problem and one that we are failing to address nationally, but I'm proud that Des Moines Waterworks continues to try to keep ahead of this curve. And your recognition, Ted, that when it comes to our relationship with our employees, that we're not just guided by the letter of the law, and that, you know, we've negotiated this, so therefore we shouldn't negotiate on healthcare, and seeing the bigger picture, that we're in this together, that we can find a solution that's good for everybody when it comes to healthcare, and then move on to the next item. So I guess what I'm doing is I'm applauding. I think this is the right way to approach a problem.
Thank you.
Other comments? And if anyone from the union would like to speak, we'll certainly accommodate that. Well, we've spent a lot of time on this over the last couple years. I really want to thank Ted and Doug and the rest of the staff who have spent so much time in effort in working through this. With that, I think we're ready for a vote. Michelle?
Ashburner,
Yes.
Bolton,
Yes.
Gillette,
Yes.
Hubbard,
Yes.
Munns.
Yes.
Jeannie, did you want to speak? You can go ahead.
Yes, I know Bill was going to talk to the board here. We would just like to thank the board for everything they've done, and the Waterworks for working with us. It's in having us part of this process. We certainly appreciate it. All the employees appreciate it. Even though the board doesn't see a lot of them a lot of the time, they do know and they do appreciate it. And we just like you to know that any issues in the future, we're here, we're open, we're able. And thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Jeannie, I'd like to say something too, if you can hear me now.
Yeah, we can hear you, Bill.
Yeah, I'd just like to say thanks to the board for making the transition to the new plan less impactful on the paychecks. We appreciate letting the union leadership be part of this process, and we're open to discuss with the board any issues in the future. And Ted, thanks a lot for working with our union over these matters. We appreciate it too. We spent a lot of time together too talking about it.
My pleasure.
Okay. Now on to the next topic, which is 2021 corporate insurance. Ted?
Yes, another important topic for discussion. You will all recall that this topic was presented at the Finance and Audit Committee meeting this month. There were a couple of key points that were presented specifically related to cyber liability and our intention to add another $5 million of cyber liability protection, which is included in these quotes. And then there was also consideration of our flood coverage. Cincinnati had originally declined to cover, and then they came back and offered to cover at some lower levels. And then we thought we might have an option through ICAP, but luckily Jack Carr is here to help us understand exactly where we landed and what that means, and then we can move forward with the discussion and approval. Jack?
Terrific. Thanks, Ted. Good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay.
Yes.
Thanks for having me again at the board meeting. Certainly appreciate it. We got through the renewal process. Ted had a great recap there as far as what we were faced with. When I had last spoken with you guys, we did have some last minute changes with Cincinnati Insurance being willing to offer some flood coverage. While not at the same limit that we had before, it was at a lesser limit. They did agree to do that, which was a positive sign. What we had wanted to do, it forced us to market the insurance. We had another potential solution for ICAP, which is a group pooling of municipal organizations here in Iowa, which we were holding out for and had some promising initial indications. However, at the end of the day, ICAP did end up declining. And the reason for the declination was purely because of reinsurance issues. And as I had touched on at the last board meeting, the commercial property and casualty insurance marketplace has really suffered some catastrophic losses, specifically this year with derecho and then 2 years prior. So reinsurance has really tightened up, and due to the values that we had, not necessarily specific to flood, just building values in total, it did cause reinsurance to decline. Now, based on this fact, I do have another little bit of positive news there as well, too. I was able to go back to Cincinnati Insurance and push them even harder based on the fact that they did reduce the flood limits and get them to agree to a 2-year rate guarantee for us, which is a big positive, especially in this marketplace, because property rates have really been widely affected. So we will be protected based on positive loss ratios for the next 2 years, or 2 years in total, for the rate with Cincinnati Insurance on both property, and that also applies to liability as well, too. It does not apply to auto, but those would be the 2 lines of business that it does apply to. So big positive, as quite honestly, it is a very rare occurrence to where when the market gets hard or firms up that you can get a carrier to be willing to agree to a 2-year rate guarantee. So very big positive there for us. The third item that I wanted to touch on is just overall strategy for next year at renewal time. We are going to plan on a very extensive marketing as well for the renewal time. You know, commercial insurance is going to continue to be on the rise. While we're protected with the rate guarantee, it still makes sense to do a broad-based marketing approach. You know, what is one thing today could be different tomorrow. And so ICAP might be able to accept things next year on reinsurance. So I definitely think it's good practice for us to go out and do due diligence on behalf of Waterworks, and we'll plan on strategizing well in advance to do so. So we have plenty of time to do due diligence on your guys' behalf. And I guess the last item I'll touch on is cyber liability. Cyber liability, we did have an initial indication for an excess of $5 million, to which we had planned on initially budgeting $20,000, $18,000 to $20,000 for. And the big positive news is it came in a lot less expensive. It was right around the $12,000 mark, roughly, to buy up that limit. So it did actually come in more favorable than where we were at before. So a good choice on our part to really pursue that additional cyber.
I'm sorry, Jack, but do you know why that came in lower than you expected? I mean, do you have any explanation for that?
Yes, so we had an indication based on what the market was doing, essentially. So we actually, once we went and pursued it, we were able to market it out to several carriers and just get a firmer number. So quite honestly, it was competition. So we had budgeted, you know, a little bit more of a conservative number, and then when we got the green light to go ahead and pursue forward, we were able to push the marketplace and make sure we had the most competitive number to put forth. Yep, great question. Thanks, Graham. So I think that's really it. The good news overall, we did come in below budget. So with these changes, we did pick up a 2-year rate guarantee, and we did improve the program overall by adding an excess of $5 million layer on the cyber liability insurance. And as far as strategy concerned next year, again, would personally recommend that we're able to market as we did this year, but even a broader scale, just to continue to do due diligence as the market continues to firm up. But that's all I had to touch on today, unless anybody else had any specific questions or items that you guys would like me to address.
I think we'll get a motion and then we'll take questions.
Are you looking for that motion?
Mhm.
I'll make so moved.
Second?
Now we'll take any questions anyone has for Ted or for Jack on the issue of our insurance. Any comments?
So with the savings that we have here, did we find what we needed for the health insurance above?
Well, I don't think so quite, but
No.
Goes every little bit, right?
Yeah.
right.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that we accept the insurance program renewal. Michelle, you want to take the roll call vote?
Ashburner,
Yes.
Bolton,
Yes.
Gillette,
Yes.
Hubbard,
We weren't able, there we go.
Yes.
thank you, Munns.
Yes. The next item on the agenda, approval of proposed 2021 water rates.
Diane, if I may.
Yes.
Well, as you all know, we have talked about rates and cost of service. And I think if we include cost of service in the discussion, we've been talking about rates, this particular rate season for nearly a year. We did have Raftellus, a national consultant who specializes in rate making and cost of service studies. We did have them do a cost of service model review and update for us more than a year ago. Raftellus in their modeling and their analysis determined for us or shared with us that they thought that we did need to make some changes in our cost of service methodology in the way that we assigned costs to our customer groups. They thought it would be more appropriate to do things, a couple of things a little differently. We've had presentations from Raftellus at various board and committee meetings. We have had a number of discussions about the rate making process and why we believe that the costs are now more appropriately applied to the different rate classes. And that has resulted in a little bit of a different rate increase profile this year than we typically see. 2 weeks ago, I guess it was, at the Finance and Audit Committee meeting, Peggy Freeze gave a presentation, a nice overview of where we intended to go with rates, and shared what staff would propose for rate increases. Raftellus had actually recommended to the board that we do 3 things: that we make adjustments in the volume rate, that we implement a fixed fee to address some interclass equities that we have in some of our customer classes, and that we make some changes to address peaking. The recommendation from staff 2 weeks ago was that we stay with a simple adjustment in the volume rate and hold off on any rate structure change, even though it was recommended by Raftellus until next year, but that we do take into consideration the new methodology that they proposed and try to move revenue from each customer class closer to the cost of serving that customer class based on their analysis. So that recommendation was made. The recommendation specifically gave a number of rate increase recommendations in terms of percent, probably most notably City of Des Moines retail 5%, wholesale purchase capacity 15%. And then there were some variations above and below that, depending on the specific customer class. Now, we did receive a letter yesterday from West Des Moines Waterworks expressing some concerns with the cost of service methodology and reserving the right to appeal if the rates are approved and published as recommended. And that is something that I think we will need to evaluate and give due diligence to in time. But I think the most appropriate thing to do now is to move forward with approval of the recommended rate increases and the timeline, and keep the process moving, and then we can address that as we go forward. So with that, I'd be happy to answer questions. I know Peggy is online with us too, and would be happy to answer questions as well.
Can we get a motion first and then we'll take questions on anything?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, questions on this?
Rick, I have a procedural question. Do we need to be reading these motions aloud?
The motion is displayed on the screen, but it's perfectly appropriate to read it. So for purposes of clarity, I suppose there may be some people listening who don't have the video. And perhaps I could just state the motion is to approve the proposed rate increase according to the attached schedule to be effective for all water bills issued on or after April 1, 2021, and direct staff to publish the adopted rates as provided by law.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Yes, Ted, we've spoken about it before in some of our committee meetings and board meetings, but I wondered if you could speak a bit about cross-subsidization, how that plays a factor in this decision in our analysis of rates.
Certainly, Joel, and I will take a swing at this, and then obviously we'll let Peggy add to it and to clarify or expand. But cross-subsidization, just by definition, is when one of our customer classes is paying portions of the cost of service for another customer class. And most importantly, the wholesale master agreement that we have with our wholesale purchase capacity customers and other agreements we have with other customer classes prohibit cross-subsidization, meaning we can't collect rates and fees from one customer group to pay the cost of serving another customer group. And so that's really at the heart of what Raftellus has done in terms of suggesting modifications to our cost of service methodology. They believed that some of what we were doing was allowing for cross-subsidization to take place between customer classes, and recommended changes that would help eliminate that. I hope that's responsive to your question, Joel, but I would also offer Peggy the opportunity to elaborate on that as needed.
I think you covered it well, Ted.
Yes, I think you hit it. I appreciate that. I think it's important to remember that we have a contractual obligation to avoid cross-subsidization. And that's a driving factor of our decision here.
Agreed.
I mean, I believe that we'll need to continue to work on this over the next few years to bring this into alignment, but this is certainly a first step in doing so.
Diane, thanks for saying that. I mean, that's right. I mean, I think that, having been on this board for a little while, what I like about what's happening here is that we're making a first step. I feel like we're moving forward on rethinking the way that we determine rates, but I appreciate you pointing out the fact that this is a multi-staged effort. It's something that's going to take a while to institute. And again, as I've said, I think in committee meetings and board meetings, I think the process, the hiring of Raftelis, the thoughtful process that they've gone through with our staff to think about this, in very broad terms, it gives me, as a ratepayer and as a board member, it gives me a lot of comfort.
I'll second those thoughts and appreciate Joel's question, because I mean, really that's what it's coming down to, is the responsibility that we have to all of our ratepayers and investigating these rates and moving forward with the process is what is our responsibility as a board member. I just appreciate the comments that have already been shared.
Any other comments? As Ted said, we've been working on this now, and not just staff, but it's taken up a lot of board time so that we can all understand. I believe we've been fairly transparent in these discussions and in making our consultants report available to our customers to understand this. This requires that notice take place, and as Ted said, we can then deal with some of the issues that were raised by West Des Moines in the letter that we just received. But I don't believe that there's really any reason that we would postpone or put the vote off at this time. So with that, is there anything else? Okay, Michelle, you want to go ahead?
Ashbrenner?
Yes, sorry.
Bolton?
Yes.
Gillette?
Yes.
Hubbard?
Yes.
Munns?
Yes. The next item on the agenda is the proposed 2021 budget.
Yes, Diane, this is another item that was presented at the Finance and Audit Committee meeting this month, the proposed 2020 budget. And I do want to take a minute to recognize all the staff time that goes into the budget preparation process, and especially the folks in finance who bear the brunt of the budget prep, but every year they do a great job. And we brought forward the budget at Finance and Audit. Michelle Holland gave a nice overview presentation of the budget. The presentation is again included in the packet for your reference and that of anyone who has a look at the materials. This is kind of the next step in the budget process, which is to request permission from the board to schedule a public hearing for next month, where we would actually have a public hearing on the budget and then approve the budget. And even before that, there will be one additional step at the next Finance and Audit Committee, where we will see the short departmental presentations to give you a little bit more of a drill down into what has changed this year to next year in each of the departmental budgets, so that you should be well informed on the overall budget and what has changed year over year, and be prepared to approve that budget in November. But for today, we are asking permission, or we're asking the board to establish a public hearing date as a date of the November board meeting in order to act on the budget.
Can I have a motion to establish the date of the public hearing as the date of the November 2020 board meeting to act on the passage of the 2021 budget and direct staff to publish notices set forth in the Des Moines Waterworks Board Policy Manual?
So
So
moved.
moved. Second.
Are there any questions about this? Fairly straightforward. Michelle?
Ashburner,
Yes.
Bolton,
Yes.
Gillette,
Yes.
Hubbard,
Yes.
Muns.
Yes. Des Moines Waterworks Rules and Regulations update.
Yes, this is another essentially annual request that we bring to the board to approve changes in our water service rules and regulations. This year, I think the proposed changes were fairly straightforward. Amy Kaler did give a presentation. I think she gave a presentation of Jenny's materials, but Amy gave us a presentation at the planning committee meeting this month and kind of reviewed each of the proposed changes. Some of the more significant ones are listed there on screen. One item that was included on the list there is adding language regarding customer right of appeal specific to rate changes. And that there was also a comment in West Des Moines' letter of yesterday related to that appeal process as it may relate to appeals within the wholesale master agreement, which we will also take a look at that. But fairly straightforward proposed changes in the rules and regs proposed to become effective January 1, including updates in fees for water service, connection, disconnection, all those kind of things. And we would ask that the board approve those proposed changes.
Can I have a motion to approve the proposed revisions to the rules and regulations with an implementation date of January 1, 2021 and direct publication of the changes as required by statute?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions? I have a question, and it has to do with, we had a letter, the letter from West Des Moines asking questions about the customer right of appeal specific to rates and charges. And I know we're going to respond to that. Have we looked at that issue with what they have argued in their letter prior to this? I know we haven't had much time, having just gotten the letter.
Yeah, and I will say, Diane, that we haven't looked at it enough for me to be able to be definitive here today. But, you know, to the extent that there may be differences in the appeal provisions in the agreement versus the appeal provisions that we've added to the rules and regs, I would defer to Rick, but I assume that the appeal provisions in the agreement would prevail. Rick, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I think what they're saying is that there isn't any administrative action required of them before they could bring a claim based on the contract. In other words, they don't feel a administrative remedy is something that they need to participate in order to bring a claim under the contract. And that's an issue that I think is debatable, but should not impair the board moving forward to add this provision in the rules and regulations, which govern the whole range of customers and not just that particular customer and that particular contract.
Any more questions? Hearing none. Michelle?
Ashburner,
Yes.
Bolton,
Yes.
Gillette,
Yes.
Hubbard,
Yes.
Muns.
Yes. The next item is the amendment to the home serve agreement.
Yes, Diane, this is another item that was shared with the board at this month's planning committee meeting. Another presentation from Amy Kaler, specifically related to the second amendment to our agreement with home serve related to service line protection. We entered into an initial agreement with home serve in 2012 to provide service line protection to our customers. That has been a very popular program with our customers, and we believe very successful. There was a first amendment to the program in 2016, which added coverage for frozen service lines to the protection, which is something we had a significant problem with in 2014. So we were pleased that they were able to add that at really no additional cost. And it also provided for a number of years of rate stability. Not that the rates didn't change, but they were pre-programmed and we knew what the increases were going to be. That extension, that first amendment, will expire at the end of this year. And so what we're bringing to the board today is what would be the second amendment to the home serve agreement, which will extend the current agreement much as it is today through the end of 2025. It provides additional what I would call rate security, where they have pre-programmed the rates, as you can see on screen there, through the end of that time period. But they're also proposing to make a $15,000 annual contribution to Project H2O, which is the program that we use to help low-income households pay their water bills in times of need. So we believe that is a proposal that's of value to our customers. And we think that the home serve has served the customers very well and will continue to do so. And we would recommend that the board approve the amendment.
Can I have a motion authorizing the board to approve, for board approval, and authorizing the CEO and general manager to execute the second agreement to the program agreement with Home Serve USA?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions about this?
Ted, remind me that $15,000 contribution for the low income ratepayers. How big is that program? I'm trying to figure out what that percentage of that program would be.
You know, I'm going to ask Amy if she can weigh in on the total size. You know, I think we fund it to a certain degree and then we accept contributions. I think this would be a sizable increase.
Yes. The customer contributions that come in, you know, sometimes customers state, I'd like to pay a little bit extra a month and put that towards this fund. Those have really, frankly, dwindled. We don't have a lot of those anymore. For the last several years, maybe 4 or 5 years, this board has contributed $20,000 to $25,000 per year out of our operating budget that would go towards Project H2O. So this nearly doubles it.
That's important. I'm glad I asked. Thanks for that.
Yeah, and the need far outweighs the available resources. So this will be well received.
Can I ask a question, Amy? What you said that the contributions from our ratepayers have dwindled. Do we know the reason for that? Have we advertised in our various publications about this fund and what people can do?
We have not advertised for it lately. Admittedly, we you know, have relied frankly on the board's contribution. But I would say even before we backed away from advertising it quite as much, they were dwindling. That might be something that we can pick up in the future. I just think that many customers are spread thin in terms of contributing, and it's not unusual.
Yeah,
But
and
we can increase it.
I think that's an excellent point. And I see that Melissa Walker's on the call, and maybe that's something that, you know, Ted, it's you and Melissa and Jen and everybody thinks about kind of this year 2020 wrap up. I mean, I think you have a lot to talk about this year. Maybe that's something we can include in some customer information about, you know, what's being done to help customers, especially during this turbulent time, and talk about this fund. I don't think we need to go heavy handed. I'm trying to raise money for the fund, but it's well worth mentioning because Diane brings up a good point that maybe there are customers who were aware would contribute.
That's
Yeah,
a great
I mean,
idea.
I think about it and I think people, there's a lot of need out there in a lot of places because of the pandemic. But I think that giving people an opportunity to contribute towards basic services for people is something that people might be looking for. As I said, there's just going to be a lot of need.
Similarly, there seems to be an opportunity here to maybe be in the community and partner with some other organizations that might be able to help us get the word out that this program exists. And if there are some family foundations or other contributors who may be looking for a place to give coming out of this pandemic.
Agreed. And then that's something that I'll talk to Jen about a little bit. Jen and I have already talked quite a little bit about affordability and equity as it relates to the strategic planning initiative that she is already interviewing facilitators to facilitate for us. So we've talked to them about that specific question and as well as many others. But this program is a great opportunity or a great example of what we could do or what we could include in that discussion. So thank you for that suggestion.
Okay, are we ready for a vote? We haven't voted on this one yet, have we?
No.
Correct.
Okay, Michelle?
Ashburner,
Yes.
Bolton,
Yes.
Gillette,
Yes.
Hubbard,
yes,
Moines.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Mid-American Energy Company easement at the Fleur Drive Water Treatment Plant.
Yes, this is a fairly straightforward item for us here today. As you all know, Des Moines Waterworks receives its energy, its power, electric power from Mid-American Energy at the Fleur Drive Treatment Plant through transmission lines and a substation, all of which is located on our property. In April, we brought an item to the board for approval, an agreement by which Mid-American Energy updated some of the facilities within our substation and then took over ownership of those facilities, which was a great opportunity for us to transfer ownership of high voltage electric equipment to the entity that has the most experience and expertise working with that equipment. So we were very pleased about that at the time. That continues to be a good deal for us. Also at that time, we asked for permission to establish a public hearing if it became necessary to expand the size of the easement that Mid-American uses to operate and maintain those facilities, and specifically the facilities that we're transferring. It has become necessary to expand that easement, and Mike McKernan and his folks in engineering have worked with Rick and Mid-American, obviously, to craft an expanded easement area for them to use to facilitate their operation and maintenance of those facilities. So today we bring that easement agreement to the board for approval, and we will need to go through a quick public hearing process, which we scheduled based on the board's approval in April.
And with that, I will open the public hearing for comments from the public regarding the granting of an easement to Mid-American Energy Company across Waterworks real estate. Do we have anyone who would like to speak on this issue? I'll ask Ted, have you received any comments from any members of the public on this easement?
We have not, Diane.
Okay, I will go ahead and close the public hearing and entertain a motion to authorize the chairperson and CEO and general manager to execute the document granting an easement to Mid-American Energy Company.
so moved.
Second.
Are there any questions with respect to this item?
So there's no fiscal impact. They don't pay us for this easement in any way.
No, they don't. I mean, we're providing them an easement so that they can provide us service. So it's kind of part of the package that we give them that easement. Now, if they were getting an easement from us across our property somewhere else that didn't relate to providing service, there might be. But even in that case, we have some reciprocal sort of relationships with other utility companies where we, grant each other easements, and same with the city. We don't always get paid for those, but for this one, we will not be getting paid.
Other questions? Okay, Michelle, we're ready for the vote.
Ashburner,
Yes.
Bolton,
Yes.
Gillette,
Yes.
Hubbard,
yes,
Moines.
Yes. The next item is the change order number 3 for the City of Des Moines Ingersoll Avenue Streetscape from M.L. King Jr. Parkway to 24th Street, Phase 1 project.
Yes, this project relates to all of the work that's going on in Ingersoll, which I'm sure you are all familiar with. I'm certainly familiar with it when I try to go to lunch that direction because they've been working on it all year. You may recall that in March, the board authorized staff to reimburse the City of Des Moines for water main work associated with that project. There was additional work that we knew was coming. It was going to be included in a subsequent project. Basically, that involved abandoning the water main that's on the other side of the street, the south side of the street, and removing all the hydrants and valve boxes and doing all that kind of work. And that was intended to be in the next phase, the 2021 phase of the work, because they didn't want to interfere with the traffic, which was all using the south side of the road during construction of the project. But the project has actually progressed to the point where it is now appropriate for us to go ahead and have the contractor on this year's contract do those abandonments and remove all the fire hydrants and do the disconnections. There's value in having that done this year. For one thing, it gets us out of the way of the project next year, which will work on the south half of the road, but it also takes those facilities out of service, so there isn't a chance of them breaking and leaking under the street over the winter, and then we have to go spend money to dig up and repair something that isn't really even of value to us anymore. So we believe that it's in our best interest to go ahead and change order this into this year's contract. It's a fairly large change order, which is why we brought it to the board for approval, but it is work. It's not really extra work. It's work that was anticipated to be included in next year's project, but we believe it's most appropriate to move forward and have it done this year. So we're asking the board to authorize execution of this change order now.
Can I have a motion to authorize the CEO and general manager to execute change order number 3 to the Ingersoll Avenue Streetscape from M.L. King Jr. Parkway to 24th Street, Phase 1 project in the amount of $99,509.50.
So moved.
Second.
Ted,
Questions?
I just have one comment, and anything that we can do to help speed up the Ingersoll Streetscape project is helpful. I get a complaint about 2 or 3 times a week from a ratepayer, and when I say a ratepayer, I mean my wife, about how long that project is taking. So anything that we can do to help get that through will bring harmony in the Gillette household.
We'll do our best, Graham.
Anything additional on this? Michelle, please take the roll call vote.
Ashburner,
Yes.
Bolton,
Yes.
Gillette,
Yes.
Hubbard,
yes,
Moines.
Yes. So the next item is the gallery valve chamber structures reconstruction.
Yes, and this is frankly a pretty exciting project, I have to say. We've talked at various board committee and board meetings about the gallery and the condition of the gallery and the value of the gallery and the age and the quality of water and all of the things associated with the gallery and the vital asset that it is for us. We've talked about how a number of the manholes are in need of rehabilitation. We've talked about how to accomplish that. And finally, now we're talking about what we're actually going to do. And I want to recognize the folks in engineering, specifically Don Staley, who has been the one to put together the design for this with help from his folks in the field. What I think was a very creative design, and it is the design that has allowed us to really stretch our dollar, make the most out of this rehab. You'll remember that when we requested authorization to bid this project, we bid it with a couple of alternates because we didn't know if we were going to have enough money in the project to do all of the work that we wanted to do. The base bid was 3 valve chambers, 4, 5, and 7, which I know this drawing is a little hard to see, but they're kind of the bigger red boxes, the 3 to the right of the image. The alternate number 1 was the 3 red boxes to the left of the image, and then alternate number 2 was kind of in the middle of the project, all in one spot there, but there are 2 structures that are attached together. And we really didn't anticipate that we would be able to do all the work, but we had strong interest in this project. We did receive 6 bids, which is excellent for this type of work, and we are very pleased with the how tight the bids were, frankly, and the number of bids, and the fact that the bids came in a range that will allow us to do all of this work at the same time. So I'm very pleased to recommend that the board award this project to Synergy Contracting LLC, who has done quite a bit of work for the Waterworks before, and we're confident that they can manage this. And this too is a public hearing, Diane, for this project.
Yes, yeah. At this point, I will open the public hearing for comments from the public concerning the project's form of contract, plans and specifications, and estimated cost. Do you see anyone, Michelle, that would like to speak?
No hands raised.
Ted, have you received any comments from the public on this project?
We have not.
Okay, with that, we'll close the public hearing. The board finds that the project reflects appropriate coordination of existing infrastructure, and there are no suitable facilities available for rent or sharing in lieu of the project. Now I'd like a motion to approve the project's form of contract, plans and specification, and estimated cost.
So moved.
Second.
Michelle, will you want to take a roll call vote?
Ashburner,
Yes.
Bolton,
Yes.
Gillette,
Yes.
Hubbard,
Yes.
Moines.
Yes. Ted, will you now provide the analysis of the bids and make a recommendation? I think you've done this, but
I think I did it out of order, Diane, but I will just reiterate that we recommend award to the low bidder, Synergy Contracting LLC.
I'd like a motion to approve the general manager's recommendation awarding the contract to Synergy Contracting LLC in the amount of $432,770 and authorize the chairperson and CEO and general manager to execute the contract.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions on this?
Just a comment. Having learned how efficient and critical the gallery is to our water production, I'm glad to see this project moving forward and glad we got so many bids.
Agreed.
Okay, Michelle, you want to take the roll call vote on this?
Ashburn,
Yes.
Bolton,
Yes.
Gillette,
Yes.
Hubbard,
yes,
Muns.
Yes. The last action item is the legal services request for proposals.
Yeah, Diane, I will cue this up quickly, and then it's really intended to be a discussion for the board. We have talked about legal services proposals a couple of different times in the last year or 13 months, I guess. In September of 2019, we talked about historically kind of where we'd been with legal services and also when and how often it had gone out for consideration. We also touched on it briefly at the September F&A meeting where I think the extent of this discussion there was Graham asking the staff to prepare a request for proposals, which we have done in draft form, admittedly, in the attachment before we heard feedback from the board. And just as a quick review in the memo, you can see a couple of points of interest. I would say that the board has had specific counsel to the board since 1957 when the Dickinson firm was retained initially. In 1998, Rick Malm was designated as legal counsel to the board as only the second attorney in that string of attorneys from Dickinson all the way since 1957. In January of this year, Rick transitioned to an of counsel role with the firm. And so some thought that it might be an appropriate time to discuss the possibility of moving forward with a legal services request for proposals. So with that by way of background, we've identified a couple of questions that the board may want to consider today, including the timeline for issuing and considering a proposal.
If I may, Ted, before you get into that, just add on to the background and why I kind of moved this forward the way that I did. I've been on this board for a while, and this is something that gets kicked around every once in a while that we, maybe we should consider an RFP for legal services. And for one reason or the other, it's something that always gets kicked down the road. Most times we decide it's not a good time, that today's not a good day to do this. And so we consider it later. And it is interesting to me. I think we've been well served by our legal counsel since well before I was born, since 1957. But that's a long time to have a contract with a single firm. And so it's really my hope, and why I brought this up, was that we consider putting this out to bid as probably is appropriate from time to time, at least every 60 years. And but seriously, to put it out to bid, and more important than that, put something in our, I don't know what the appropriate term would be, whether it's in the policy or in some sort of a file where we have a regular review of legal services so that we don't kick this down the field. And Ted and I talked about, what is that timing? It's probably not an annual review of legal services. Maybe it's a 5-year review with some sort of annual update. I don't know. But my thought process was that more than just saying it's time to put this out to bid, I think it's time for the board to consider putting together, not only if we put it out to bid, but it's something that we consider doing on a regular basis every 5 years or what have you, but then have that regular legal review. So it's really more than, it's more to develop a broader process for how we review and look at our legal services. And I think the timing is right, as Ted pointed out, with Rick going of counsel. He still continues to serve this board and does so well, but it probably is a good a red flag waving in our face that it's the time to do this is now. So with that, I'm sorry to interrupt, Ted.
No, Graham, that's fine. And the intent is, the intent today is to discuss that and other considerations. And Graham, after you and I had talked about that, I think we did include something in the RFP to indicate that we anticipated that the outcome of the negotiations would be a legal services contract, and that contract would be reviewed at least every 5 years. So I don't know that addresses entirely what you're talking about in terms of, review or if we're going to consider putting out an RFP. But we did indicate that every 5 years that the contract would be reviewed and updated as needed or sent out for consideration. So.
I don't know what's appropriate at this point, Diane, but I would be willing to offer a motion just so that we can have a discussion. And
Yeah, that's what I'm kind of struggling with.
let me
here. I
make a
guess
motion.
it's based on the proposal that we have with the
Right.
5-year period included in it.
Right. I'll make a motion, and if there's a second, maybe that gives us an opportunity to proceed with the discussion. But I would move that the board authorize the CEO and general manager to proceed with issuing an RFP and preparing a final recommendation to the board about the review of legal services at an appropriate time, whether that's every 5 years or whatever the CEO would like to recommend.
Graham, question on that motion, because the last bullet says firms to receive the request for proposals. And one thing I would like to see is that anyone on this board who has maybe been contacted by other firms in the past that have said, hey, if you ever have an if you ever do put this out to RFP, I'm interested. I don't want to see this only go out to 2 or 3 firms. And so just out of curiosity, the 5th bullet, how would you see us handling that?
That's a good point, Sue. I think that could be another thing. Let's say we take my motion kind of as I roughly worded it, which was not pretty, that I could amend that we direct the CEO and general manager to draft to finalize the RFP, but then also to develop a plan to widely distribute that RFP to appropriate entities. And, I was just thinking, so I could do that, stop. And then just as a sidebar, I'm sitting on the Botanical Gardens search committee, and they're looking for a search firm to handle the CEO search. And they identified a number of entities. Then they use a number of different ways to publicize that. They put it on LinkedIn. They did a couple of those things. That's probably not appropriate for legal services, but I think we would task Ted and staff to determine how best to distribute that as widely as possible for legal services. So I think that's a very good point. And I would be willing to amend my motion so that not only do they finalize the RFP, they finalize some policy language for us, and they develop a distribution plan so that distribution plan goes as widely as possible.
So I guess, can you summarize your motion again, and then
I'll try. Let me see if I can do it in a short fashion. And that is that the board authorizes the CEO and general manager to finalize a request for proposal for legal services and a distribution plan for that RFP to ensure that it is distributed widely to potential firms that could respond to this, and to develop and to finalize an appropriate plan for the review of legal services going forward.
Okay, I will second that, but can we, will you take a friendly amendment that widely is not an Omaha firm, a Davenport firm, but within our regional area here?
Well, I think that's fair, Sue, but the question is, yeah, I don't know how to, yes, I hear what you're saying. I mean, they're going to have to have some sort of local representation, right? Is that what you're saying?
That's a better way to say it. Yeah.
Right. I mean, so it could be a firm that might be based in Minneapolis, but has an office here.
Right.
Okay. So local representation.
Is that achieved with the criteria listed in the scope of services that they have to be able to show up at all of our meetings?
Well, I think we're going to talk about those things and maybe give some direction as soon as we get a motion on the table.
Well, you have got a motion and you've got a second right now.
Okay, all right. So let's talk about some of these things and give some direction to Ted and the staff on this. I think I just heard Andrea say that they have to have a local presence, meaning that they have to be able to physically attend our meetings. Is that correct?
Yes, and I think that's already included in the scope of services, but I think that just that addresses Sue's amendment about the firms being more local than regionally.
And I assume that we mean we want them to be able to attend in person as opposed to virtually.
Yes. Post-pandemic, yes.
Yes. Got it.
The timeline for issuing the RFP and evaluating the proposals, something that the staff would like to have some discussion on?
Absolutely, Diane. I guess I'm interested to know if the board, I assume we're going to have this discussion and then we'll update the RFP and then we can share that, and we're going to develop our plan for distribution and share that possibly the next board meeting or committee meeting. So is the intent that we're going to issue this by the end of the year or in the first quarter, or?
Yeah, I think in my opinion, I'd like to see it go sooner as opposed to later. So I think the end of the year would be reasonable in my opinion.
So issue by year end?
Yeah, that would be reasonable, I think.
And there may be some additional details that we would want to talk about. I mean, if Graham's chair for finance and audit, maybe we run this through finance and audit for a final review. That would be coming up fairly soon at the November finance and audit meeting before it would then come to the board maybe for details. But yeah, I think this is something we've been talking about for a long time for different reasons. And I just want to make sure we capture all the reasons why it is we are doing this.
Mm-hmm. And I think, by the end of the year, Sue, gives us an opportunity. Actually, we could look at it at Finance and Audit in November. We could look at it again at Finance and Audit in December before it came to the December, meeting. And then, in thinking through, I guess, clarifying what Ted asked, if the goal here is to kind of have it ready to go and approved at the December meeting, realistically, they're not going to let the RFP until, the first of the year, just because you're not going to then let it on, the 26th of December.
Right.
I would like to, I don't mean to put Rick on the spot, but, part of the impetus for this is Rick going of counsel. And that can mean a lot of different things to different attorneys, and some continue to work nearly full time. And so I don't know if Rick feels comfortable talking about his own personal plan regarding, going of counsel and eventual retirement. But I would love to hear from him about how he intends to keep serving the board if he's continues to be our counsel, how much longer he intends to work. That might.
Is that, Joel, just let me interrupt you. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Is that a fair question to ask now, since his firm is likely to be a participant in the RFP?
The reason I ask is because as I've discussed with some of you, I'm not terribly comfortable moving forward with this at this moment. I think I would feel more comfortable, I don't know if it's 6 months from now. I agree, it's been far too long, and I love the idea of having a set, whether it's 4 years or 5 years, some periodic review policy. I think that's great, and we should pursue that. This exact moment seems like a particularly challenging one for us, given the progress we've made on regionalization and the legal services that will require, the rate setting and some of the legal issues we face there, the permitting on the Raccoon River, the public information litigation that's in the works. It seems to me like you're right, there will never be a perfect time to change council. There's never going to be calm waters. This seems like a particularly challenging time.
And so your question to Rick is pertinent, because what you're trying to determine is, are we going to have Rick, or is our time with Rick specifically going to diminish in the next 6 months or something? So I understand your question. I'm sorry to have been.
Right. Yeah. Is going of council. I understand why that might have spurred this desire, but that doesn't, in a lot of cases, that doesn't, how we're represented might not change at all in the near future. All that said, I support moving forward this in the not so distant future. I'm just doing it this month when we have all these other legal balls in the air. It would not be my first choice. And so I just would love to hear from Rick a little bit about his plans.
Happy to respond to that. I am currently of counsel at my firm, which primarily means that I'm no longer an equity owner of the firm. I don't share in its profits. I receive a different kind of compensation. And I also have the freedom to not work on things beyond a level that I want to do. Having said that, I remain fully committed without any sunset date to meeting the needs of the Waterworks for legal services for the foreseeable future, for so long as I am able, with the idea that a time frame measured in a year or two will involve some winding down. As a part of that, I have been committed and am committed both to the Waterworks and to my firm to effecting transition and knowledge transfer and making sure that others are available and are brought up to speed to meet the legal services needs of the Waterworks with my assistance and under my direction and with my support. And I think Ted will confirm this, that he and I have talked a number of times about this topic, and it has been a concern, as it is with many of the, I'll just put it politely, aging staff members and contractors that you have, that need to have people available to meet needs as they arise, as people decline in their commitment or might plan for transition. So I've been doing that and plan to do it. And that doesn't necessarily affect your decision-making on timing of an RFP, but I think it might be a consideration in how my firm responds to the RFP. We are in the process of making sure we're able to meet all the needs of the Waterworks. But for now, I am available and committed without, I think, significant limitation on my ability to meet the Waterworks needs. And that will certainly continue beyond the period of 6 months, a year, 2 years, something like that.
So Rick, question for you in regards to what you just said. It sounded like that transition that you are willing to do would be if your firm is selected. Could you speak to transition should another firm be selected and how you would be engaged?
That's a hard question, Sue. I don't know how an engagement to affect a transition to another firm would work. I hadn't.
Well, we will need to know. To me, that is a very important question. And if your firm is not willing to do that, that certainly sends the wrong message.
I think you're muted.
Okay, sorry. I did not intend to send a message of unwillingness to transition should another firm be selected. I do see practical problems in implementing any such plan.
So I guess, okay, sorry.
Can you expand on that a little bit? I mean, your firm has had this locked up since '57. There are obviously some things that would need to be transitioned to the next legal counsel. I mean, I need to hear a little bit more.
Well, I guess, Sue, as I envision a transition within the staffing at my firm, what I have thought it consisted of was deciding on each bit of work as it came in and sharing that and assigning that and providing opportunities for others to get involved in a kind of moving forward gradually. A shift to a different firm would involve a very different kind of transition, I think. And I will say that I have not given a significant thought to how that shift would work.
I feel like I can kind of see where Rick would struggle, having gone through a major transition like this, a staff transition like this at our organization. When you have 57 years of intimate working knowledge of a topic, it's very difficult to transfer that all within a month, 2 months, whatever that may be, of unloading all of the very intricate details of how contracts came to be and why that intent was there. And certainly just a sharing of contracts and sharing of kind of more of the factual pieces is a simpler piece of the puzzle, but all of that background history would be much more difficult to transfer, which brings me to a kind of a similar question to what Joel had. I definitely see the need for an audit or a review of our legal services and to send out an RFP and to do that more regularly in the future. But with all of the things that Joel already listed and articulated, would we give a fair review to the proposals that came in, knowing where we are at this moment, if we did it by the end of the year as opposed to first quarter of next year? And I'm not sure where I sit on that. I guess my larger question is with things like regionalization, which I feel like is the big one that would address all of the other legal issues with West Des Moines potential appeal and the permitting. We had intended for us to know an answer one way or the other on that by early next year. So is there any reason to wait until first quarter next year?
You know, there may, I hear what Joel and Andrea are saying, that, you know, maybe there's a rationale to wait to the first quarter, and I think we can discuss that and should discuss that. And so let me just offer this and then let everybody else chime in that I made a motion that said by the end of the year, and we now should vote on that. And when we get to the point we can vote on that. If that motion were to fail, if you were to decide that the real sticking point there is the timetable, I would hope that immediately somebody could make another motion that could say that we revisit this issue in the first quarter or by the end of the first quarter of 2021 or something like that. That could satisfy me that the clock is ticking. There's going to be a time where this comes back to the board again. What I really don't want to do is do what we've done in the past, and that's say now's not the time. So what I'm suggesting is let's talk about this as long as you want to discuss it. Well, we can vote on my motion. If it fails, if somebody was willing to make an additional motion that says we're going to revisit this, first quarter or whatever you decide, I could understand that and would appreciate that.
Well, before we vote on it and possibly have it fail, I understand what Joel is saying. I understand the point Andrea is bringing up, and there are a lot of things going on right now. Would you be receptive, Graham, to changing your motion to be by the end of first quarter, which would be the end of March?
That simplifies things, Sue. Thank you. I've been on Zoom calls most of the day, so I think my ability to think clearly has failed.
Brain.
I would be willing. If that would make sense to Joel, Andrea, Sue, Diane, if you're still there, I would be willing to amend my motion to say by the end of the first quarter of 2021.
I'm sorry. We do what by the end of?
We would just change my motion that we've directed the board, the CEO and general manager to do these things by the end that are included in my motion by the end of the first quarter of 2021. Also admitting that there would be an opportunity there for us to revisit that and give new direction to the CEO and general manager should we need to. But there's a clock. My point of doing that is that there's a clock ticking, and that we know what that timeline is. And as I say, if there's an opportunity then or a need for us to revisit it, we could before March.
Yeah. So I agree with Joel and Andrea. I mean, I think that, and I know this goes to the issue of kicking the can. So I understand wanting to put a proposal together and get that work done and have some kind of timeline for taking a look at that. But I also don't want to put out an RFP when we are at critical negotiations and making progress to have people do a lot of work when we're at a point where we really need that historical perspective and background that Rick can provide to us, and having a lot of firms go through the work and us all go through the work to realize that we're at a point in these things where that is extraordinarily valuable to us, and that we need to have it for where we are. So I would support taking a look at it the end of the first quarter, putting it together, getting some of these details worked out, and then keeping the question of the timing of that open for us to look at again, dependent on all of these other things.
Sue, if you're amenable, I will amend my motion, and if you feel like seconding that, that will change the direction from the end of the year to the end of March, is what we're directing the CEO and general manager, understanding that the CEO, general manager, and this board will have the opportunity between now and the end of March to discuss this again and make sure the timing is still appropriate to release it at the end of March.
I will second that. And just to clarify, you're not saying, all you were saying would be to reach the point, hopefully by the end of March, that the RFP would be prepared to go out.
Correct.
Wait, okay.
Correct. It's prepared to go out and answers your very valid question about how do we make sure we've identified the right firms and are going to have the right people responding to this. So we have a game plan by the end of March. And again, Ted would understand and the staff would understand. They want to come back and just make sure this board is ready to go at the end of March. But the goal would be that that's going to go. It's not automatic that it goes, but that's the goal.
Oh, and I just want to say I appreciate Joel and Andrea bringing this up, because some of us that have been on the board a long time, we are ready to just say, let's not kick the can down the road again. But you bring up some very compelling points, and we don't want a change in legal counsel to get in the way of some of these other pieces that are critical that we need to be doing in the next few months. So
absolutely. And
as Andrea brought up, we don't want these other pieces to get in the way of an adequate review of our legal services.
Absolutely.
I think, I just want to be clear on that, because I definitely don't want to kick the can. I just want us to make sure that we're giving a fair shake to the whole process.
And believe me, I appreciate that. And it satisfies this curmudgeon in the fact that at least the clock is ticking now, which is really what is important to me, that that we're not just saying we're going to do this and then we don't get to it for 2 years. And so I am satisfied with this, and I appreciate the thoughtful discussion.
Thanks for your flexibility, Graham, and thank you for, keeping the board honest on it, bringing this to us and making sure we're considering it.
Clarifying question, Graham. I know we've moved the target date to the end of March. I understand that completely. We talked about bringing a revised version to the November finance and audit. Can we push that out a little bit too?
Absolutely. You don't have to set a date. You just need to do that sometime so that we can get it so we can release it by the end of March. So
I am confident that Michelle will help me remember that needs to be on a finance and audit agenda between now and then.
I have no doubt.
November finance and audit being 2 weeks from now, and the things we have on the front burner right now, that is very good news.
Yep.
We'll move that out a little, and we'll be better prepared to present something of value to the board a little further out. So thank you.
Perfect.
Wow, we have a motion and hopefully in the minutes that we'll
Do
be
not
able
make
to
me restate it.
capture this. No, we
refuse.
had a motion and a second, so I think we all understand what we've done. That staff I'm going to try it, okay, to capture this. We'll put together the RFP for consideration by the board end of first quarter, March 2021, that staff will use the finance and audit committee as a review to assist in final preparation of that for the board consideration. And again, we'll put together an RFP for consideration by the board in March 2021, with the understanding that the timing of its issuance is part of the discussion that will take place.
Right. And the only thing that I'll add there is the other thing that they're going to do is develop a distribution plan for that RFP.
Correct.
To make sure that it's, and also to continue to consider the ongoing, if there's a need for a policy change for ongoing review. All I want them to do is consider it. They don't owe us anything. They need to consider that.
Okay. All right.
That's okay if I attempted to type that up tomorrow and you review that with me so we put it the way you want it in the minutes.
Yeah, send it to me and send it to Diane, and I'm sure that somewhere in there we'll figure it out.
We'll settle on something. Very good. Thought I would be helpful. I have the recording.
That may
All
not.
right, we have a motion and a second. So Michelle, would you like to do a roll call vote on that?
Ashbrenner?
Yes.
Bolton?
Yes.
Gillette?
Yes.
Hubbard?
yes.
Munns?
Yes.
Thank you.
We have information item, board committee reports, a number of which have come things that were discussed have come to this board for consideration, but we will go through them. Planning committee.
I think that we have acted on all of the items from our meeting.
Okay, thank you. Finance and audit.
We have acted on everything.
Customer relations.
I don't know of anything new other than we are continuing to have meetings. The most recent one was at the end of last week. We're moving the schedule up and trying to condense more information in. So we've squeezed an additional meeting in there, and Ted can, I don't have the date in front of me, but Ted probably has it. And just good cooperation. We're getting down to some of the tough issues that we know we need to address. And I think there still seems to be a real willingness to continue to talk about regionalization. It's just a real interest from everyone in the room.
Yeah, I'll say that there is a lot of staff work that needs to be done between meetings, and we certainly appreciate that. And that's been done willingly by all of the participants in the meetings. And I believe that we continue to make progress and that it is a positive.
And Diane,
I'm
glad you brought up the staff time, because right now it's really on West Des Moines for some of the additional financial information to look at depreciation and bonding and other things. So we are putting an awful lot on West Des Moines as far as interest and needs, and coming back with some real finite details. So and they're moving as quickly as they can. I think Ted gave them a little bit of a pass, and I appreciated it when you mentioned the size of their staff versus the size of our staff, Ted. I mean, they don't have a ton of people to be running these numbers and doing things, and yet they're making it a priority.
They are, and I would agree that we're making progress, but it's a lot of work for them and for us.
But that's it.
Okay, Bill Stowe Memorial Committee.
I'll combine the Bill Stowe and the Botanical Garden, and then I got two quick personal things. One, the Bill Stowe Committee did meet with some of the folks over at the Park Foundation, and it kind of walked around the site. And I just tell you that to tell you that this continues to move, albeit slowly due to the pandemic. But there are a lot of thoughtful people that are involved in thinking about the potential for something at the park. So stay tuned for that. The Botanical Garden continues to move forward. The solarium is open to the public and hasn't been for the pandemic, but it is now. The search for the CEO that I mentioned earlier is ongoing. The first step is to find the search committee, but then hopefully very quickly identify a new CEO for that facility. The other things that I wanted to mention was, you probably noticed, if my camera was on, my COVID office partner, Bart, was walking in and out of the room. He's my dog. We went out to the Maffett Lake facility a couple of times, and hadn't been out there in a while. And if you haven't been out to Maffett Lake, it's a great time to go out there and walk around. It's well kept. I couldn't have been happier about being able to be out there and walk around. So if you have the opportunity.
They run into me and my dog out there.
There you go.
Every once in a while.
Yeah, it's nice. And then the last thing, I just want to say thanks to Ted and the rest of the staff. I was contacted, and maybe the rest of you had been at some point, by a couple of journalists out of Minneapolis who are working on a book that they're writing about water and the environment. Dave and Josephine have become good friends of mine in this process. And they came down and visited with Ted and Jen and a bunch of people, and took the tour at Des Moines Waterworks. And I thank them for that time. And it just reminds me of how lucky we are to have such a strong professional staff that knows what they're doing and keeps everything right, keeps the trains running on time.
Thanks, Graham. Well, I will pass on both of those comments to the ground staff related to Maffitt and especially the lab staff, and Jen was part of that tour too. So thank you for that.
Waterworks Park Foundation Board, anything?
You have their minutes in your packet. The one thing that I would point to is that they continue to take meeting their fundraising goal very seriously, and you'll note that they are reviewing proposals to hire a campaign fundraiser company to help them with that goal. So hoping to see some significant progress soon.
Well, the park looks beautiful, and I love the underpass, and it certainly is getting a lot of use. And the Ragbri and the one with all the lights. I don't know, what do we call that?
River Constellation.
It's gorgeous. It's just beautiful.
And you can still buy a ring for that if you want your name on one of those. There are rings for sale.
You sure can. I'll also add, I guess, on a personal or professional note, I've attended a lot of webinars, a lot of meetings, a lot of conferences right now that are talking about the huge increase in new users out at our parks and green spaces. So I'll echo Graham's comment and thank you all for the job you do with our grounds, because I'm no doubt that they're also seeing the increases that many of our other parks and trails are seeing across the state.
Okay, Ted, do you have any comments on the COVID-19 response?
Yes, I'll go quickly. I will just respond to Andrea's comment there. We're definitely seeing significant increases in park usage, which is great. COVID-19 response, I can share with you that we have not made significant operational changes. We're trying to adjust to the new normal. Most folks are back to work and either back full-time or are working from home only part of the time. We're keeping a close eye on the numbers in Iowa. Hospitalizations, as you know, are increasing. Trying to decide if we need to take a step back or do anything differently. I would compliment the union leadership on being very engaged in that discussion and being a real part of the solution there and helping us right size our return to work. So we are moving forward, trying to protect employee health and safety, trying to do the right things. We do unfortunately have a couple of employees who tested positive within the last week, employees themselves. We believe that there wasn't a lot of exposure here on the property, and we're very thankful that to date, at least, we're not aware of a single case that has been transmitted on Waterworks property, and that's our goal, is to protect our people. So when the inevitable happens and someone is infected outside of our boundaries, that isn't spread inside the boundary. So we continue to work on that. All of the temporary employee practices that we've talked about over and over and over again are still in effect, but we're sort of settling in. The only comment I will make about the expense, it really isn't changing anymore. We've submitted it to FEMA. The request was made last month to reach out to our congressional delegation, which we are attempting to do, but you would think there was an election next week or something. They're really busy. But once that's resolved, we will certainly try to get back to them. And I think we're frankly going to have plenty of time to talk to them while FEMA decides whether they're going to pay us or not. But we still remain hopeful there. So that's the COVID update. Really no need for the ratification process that we went through in previous months because not much has changed. I will share that I think you are all aware that we had a request for information related to the incident in the park several years ago, information that we didn't feel we were authorized to release. There was a claim filed with the Iowa Public Information Board, and the board has recently directed us to obtain and release that information. And so we have done that as directed. And I would anticipate that there'll be some news coverage of that coming up soon. And then last but not least from me, You all know that Jen has returned and she's been very busy. Next month, we are going to put in this section of the agenda an external affairs update, and Jen can share with you all of the things and all of the people and all of the plans that we have related to all things external affairs. So we can all look forward to that in the coming month.
Ted, she's getting every bit of value out of our partnership meeting through the GPC meetings that she's been attending. She's hitting them pretty hard. So way to go, Jen.
I
don't know about that, but thanks, Sue.
definitely appreciate the help. There have been a lot of things kind of, if not on the back burner, on the side burner that she has pulled to the front burner and is working on, and I'm excited about that. So stay tuned. And with that, Diane, I will end.
Okay. Your packet includes the contract status spreadsheet and the September 2020 lien certifications and reversals. And if there's nothing more, we'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. We're
Bye,
adjourned.
everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody. Have a good night.
Thank
Stay
you.
Bye, all.
safe.